It's almost Christmas, and here at the December STIHL Garden Guide, we're feeling festive. And that includes making the most of the garden and all it has to offer. Hello, I'm Jane Moore and welcome to my garden. I'm here every month sharing my tips and tricks with you, so make sure you subscribe to the STIHL GB YouTube channel. You might not think it, but there is so much that you can harvest from the garden to add to your Christmas decorations. Of course, the classic options are holly and ivy, and you can use these to dress up pictures and window frames. But there are so many other plants that you can use in interesting ways. So here's a few ideas to get you started. At Christmas, simply anything with berries is a must-have. Holly, Cotoneaster, and especially Pyracantha are great to dot around. But watch out for the prickles and thorns though. Evergreens of any sort are great for decorations, so things like Christmas box are perfect for table settings. Laurels and even good old conifers are useful for bulking up bigger arrangements. And don't forget evergreen fragrant herbs like rosemary and bay tree either. Dried stems of grasses, hydrangeas, and even tough flower heads like these verbena are great for decorations, especially if you give them a little dusting of gold or a snowy spray. Sometimes they dry beautifully anyway and don't need any jazzing up at all. Now we've gathered all this lovely foliage, you might fancy making a wreath, which you can either hang on your door or use as a table centre decoration. Don't be daunted, it's so much easier than you'd imagine. So get creative, it really is great fun. You can use a wreath ring like this, adding moss and foliage and wrapping it with florist wire to hold it firm. I've done this one with string so you can see exactly what I've done. Don't worry about the string or the wire showing. By the time you finish, you really won't see it. Alternatively, you could recycle a ring from a previous year, like this straw ring from a shop-bought wreath, which I've been reusing for a few years. It's easy enough to pin foliage onto this firm base. Once you've got a base layer of evergreens built up, then add the highlight foliage, such as variegated holly, some euonymus, or some lovely fragrant rosemary. Next, you want to add a few flower heads or grasses or eye-catching elements like fruits. Finish off with any baubles, pine cones, or cinnamon sticks, and of course a ribbon or two. Now we're into the winter, my little potted alpines will all benefit from a top dress of gravel to keep them well drained, especially where the plant meets the soil. Alpines really hate getting too wet, so this will help keep them alive, as will popping them under cover in the worst of the winter rainstorms. Now that things like cannas and dahlias have succumbed to the cold weather, it's time to lift them and store the tubers for the winter. I just give them a bit of a brush off and then pop them into fresh compost, keeping them dry for the winter in the shed. If you have a very sheltered garden, then you can get away with just mulching them with straw or with leaf mould. But I always think it's a bit too risky. And I like to plant them in different places from one year to the next, and that's easy if they're in a pot at the start of the season. Much easier to keep the slugs off them too. Some plants are borderline hardy when it comes to surviving through the winter, so a little mulch will help these along. My little potted agapanthus is like this, and moving it closer to the warm wall of the house, plus a little bit of straw in the crown will just give it a bit of extra protection. Remember when you're mulching to be generous. It needs to be a couple of inches of 5 centimetres thick to make a difference. Use straw, bark, gravel or garden compost, and don't be afraid to mulch even hardy plants if your garden is very cold and prone to frosts. These winter months are the best time for planting shrubs and trees. These are long-term plants that need time to settle into the ground and put down their roots, literally. Because these tend to be the taller plants in the garden as a rule, the big trees and the shrubs or the climbing and rambling roses, they need strong root systems to anchor them and a good root system to feed them too. The great thing about bare root plants is that you get a lot of plant for your money. A container plant that costs the same amount is way smaller than these bare root plants, and that's because one in a pot needs so much more care from the grower. Bare root describes exactly what it is. This lovely Himalayan birch was literally dug up from the field it was growing in only yesterday. I need to get it planted, but it will be fine for a day or two as long as I keep it bagged up. If I'm not ready to plant straight away, and sometimes I'm not exactly sure where I want the new plant to go, then I can heel it in, which means to temporarily plant it somewhere else. That's one of the great things about bare root plants. Because they're lifted in the dormant winter season, then it gives you a bit of time before you need to worry about getting them in a permanent home. That extra time is especially helpful if you're planting a great long hedge with hundreds of plants to get in. I've decided to plant this one here though. Here are my top tips for planting bare root trees. Firstly, make sure that the hole is the right depth. Test it to make sure that it's not too shallow or too deep. This is critically important for your plant. Second, make sure your plant is the right way round for you and your garden. It will have a front and a back. The stake should sit between the roots of the tree. There are several different ways of staking, but the most important thing is to make sure that your tree is supported. Once you're happy with the position and the stake, then backfill, firming it in as you go. The other reason I love bare root plants is because they are just so much more substantial, so you get an immediate impact in the garden. This birch is twice the size of most of the potted ones that you see for sale, unless you spend a lot of money. I also love the fact that they look so much more natural than containerised plants. They have that sort of hard-grown, wind-blown look that just makes it look as if it's been there for ages, even if you only just planted it. My little log pile is looking as though it's settled in nicely. This is turning into a lovely woodlandy corner of the garden with its ferns and its trees. Let's just hope the wildlife thinks so too. I'll lift off a couple of logs and we'll see if we've got any creatures living here. Oh look, a few wood lice and things. It's not just insects that are regular visitors though. I've even spotted some birds here looking for a free lunch. Well, that's it for this month. I really hope you've enjoyed these winter projects. Don't forget to subscribe to the STIHL GB YouTube channel for more ideas, hints and tips to help you make the most of your garden. Have a wonderful Christmas and I'll see you next year.